Are you tired of leveling cake layers like this, which, let's face it, the tops have become bird food now and then, and instead want flatter, more evenly baked cake layers like this? Well, stay tuned, because in today's video, we are going to be testing 5 hacks for flat cake layers to see which ones work the best. Let's do this. Now, before we get into the hacks, a quick lesson on why we get domed cakes in the first place. So when cakes go into the oven, the first thing to heat up is the pan. So the batter, which is on the edges and the bottom of the pan, cook faster than the middle. Now once cake batter is cooked, it stops rising. But because the middle takes longer to cook than the edges, it continues to rise until it's fully cooked, resulting in that dome. So what we need to do is we need to find ways to prevent the edges of the pan from heating up too quickly, giving us a more evenly cooked cake. Which leads us into hack 1, lowering the baking temperature. So the idea behind this hack is that by lowering the temperature, our pan isn't going to heat up so quickly, which is going to result in a more evenly baked cake. So most recipes call for an oven temperature of about 180 degrees Celsius. So all you want to do is lower that temperature to about 150 degrees Celsius, which means the cooking time will also take a little bit longer. So maybe about an extra 15 minutes or so, depending on the recipe that you're using. So all you need to do for this hack is prep your cake tin as you normally would. I'm just greasing mine with some homemade pan release because I'm too lazy to line my baking tins, and then I'm pouring the batter in. Now to keep the test fair, I use the same cake batter for each hack as well as the same amount of cake batter per tin. So I weighed each cake tin to make sure they were the same. I also baked each cake layer in the middle rack of the oven, and I also specifically chose a cake recipe which gives me a decent sized dome on the top so that we can test the effects of the hacks a little bit better. Now here is a side-by-side comparison using this hack as opposed to baking this cake as normal. So there's 2 noticeable differences between our 2 cakes. The first being that the one that we baked at the lower temperature definitely has less of a dome on the top, and it also seems to have baked more evenly. So if you look at the sides and the top, it's much lighter in color, which indicates to us that, portions of the cake were less likely to overbake compared to the middle. Giving this hack a tick. Hack 2, using baking strips. So these are store-bought baking strips, and what you do is soak them in cold water for about a minute, squeeze out the excess water, and then wrap it around the outside of the cake tin. And then you just adjust it so that it fits tightly around the tin. So the idea around these baking strips is that they keep the sides of the pan cooler so that the edges don't bake too quickly. So here is a side-by-side comparison using the baking strips versus not using the baking strips. So again, we seem to have 2 key differences here. So the one where we use the baking strip, it has much less of a dome on the top, and it seems to have baked more evenly across the entire cake as well. So the exterior is a little bit lighter compared to the one where we didn't use the baking strip. So this one deserves a tick as well. Hack 3, homemade cake strips. So to make a homemade cake strip, what you do is grab an old tea towel, you want to soak that in cold water and then squeeze out some of the excess water, and then wrap it in tin foil so that it's completely covered. Then you want to use a safety pin to secure it around the edges of the cake tin. Now looking at our side-by-side comparison, again you can see that there's much less of a doming on the cake that we use the baking strips on, and it's got a much nicer color to the exterior of the cake. So, you can tell that it hasn't kind of overcooked on the edges like this cake has where we didn't use the cake strips. And that is another tick. Hack 4, using a flour nail. So the idea with this hack is that the flour nail will heat up and help cook the middle of the cake faster, so that the entire cake bakes more evenly. Now the side-by-side comparison of this hack is a little bit of an interesting one. So this is the one where I used the flour nail, and this is the one where I didn't. Now first of all, if you look at the doming, there's still a decent sized dome on this cake here where I use the flour nail. Although I will say that the doming is, I think slightly smaller, which is I guess a good thing. But in terms of the exterior of the cake and how it pretty much looks exactly the same to me. So some people swear by this nail hack. Not quite sure why it didn't work out for me. Perhaps my flour nail was maybe too small, maybe it wasn't thick enough that, it didn't maybe absorb as much heat that, it should. But yeah, basically this hack was a bit of a fail for me. Hack 5, using a water bath. So for this last hack, what you're going to do is fill your cake pan as normal and then place it into a tray which is filled with some cold water, about a third of the way up the sides of your cake tin, and then bake as normal. So the idea here is that the water will prevent the outside of the pan from heating up too quickly, resulting in a more evenly baked cake. So looking at our side-by-side comparison of the water bath cake versus the no water bath cake, I think this one has the most drastic differences. So firstly, if we look at the doming, the cake that was baked in the water bath definitely has much less of a dome compared to the one that we just baked as normal. Now, if you look at the exterior of the water bath cake, it's also much lighter in color and, it looks like it's a lot more evenly baked. It just visually looks a lot more appealing. The edges are also a lot softer too, compared to I think any of the hacks that we use today. So yeah, that's a nice little bonus as well. So this hack gets the tick of approval. And now it's time to do a full comparison to see which hack works the best. Now, in terms of doming, our water bath comes in number 1 and our homemade cake strips come in a close second. Now, the store-bought cake strips and the lowered temperature also worked pretty well, so I would recommend those methods as well. Now, in terms of the kind of crusting on the edges of the cake and, what aesthetically looks the best, I would say that the water bath again comes in as a clear winner. It's got a beautiful kind of, golden edge to it. But again, the 2 cake strip methods and the lowered temperature also have beautiful outsides to them as well. Now, if we take a more kind of practical look at these methods, let's say you're someone who owns a thriving cake business and you bake loads and loads of cakes a day and, maybe using the water bath method for every single cake layer is just maybe not the best, most practical method, then I would recommend using the lowered temperature hack as the most kind of practical and easiest method to use. But if you're someone who's more of a hobby baker and you want that perfect cake layer, then maybe the water bath would be a nice method to use as well. So that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a little bit of the science behind, flat cake layers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up below and don't forget to subscribe. But apart from that, I will see you guys in the next video.